My name's Renata. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm a language teacher, intercultural trainer, and communication skills coach. Therefore, my channel is dedicated to intercultural communication, expat life, business skills, and job search skills across cultures, and foreign language learning. I often work with native and non-native speakers of English. They often say they don't understand each other. I often hear from native speakers of English that non-native speakers of English need to improve their English so that communication between the two of them gets better. Makes sense. Whenever we learn a foreign language, we want to get better, we want to improve, we want to have a higher proficiency level, and that's great. That's what I do as a language teacher. I help people improve their language skills. However, if you've ever studied a foreign language, if you ever tried to learn and communicate with native speakers of that language, you know how hard it is. So keep learning, keep studying. Of course, I'm all for it. But there is something native speakers of the language can do. This particular video is dedicated to native speakers of English. I know this is applicable to any language, but this video is particularly for native speakers of English. So if you're a non-native speaker of English and you keep hearing from native speakers of English that you need to study more English, you need to improve your proficiency level of English, if you feel like the burden is entirely on you, send the link of this video to the native speakers of English you're usually communicating with and tell them that there is something they can do to almost instantly improve communication between the two of you. How? Well, it's called listening and speaking agility. This video is for native speakers of English wondering, what can I do in order to almost instantly improve communication with non-native speakers of English? It's not much you have to do. It's like a small step for the native speaker, a giant leap for communication between the two of you. Curious? Well then, enjoy this video about speaking and listening agility and how to improve communication between native and non-native speakers of English. At the beginning of this video, I'm gonna investigate this question: whose fault are misunderstandings? It's an interesting question, and it varies from culture to culture. Then we're going to explore listening agility, what exactly is good English, and speaking agility, the huge power of small adjustments. Let's start with the fault of misunderstandings. In communication, we have two people, the speaker and the listener, the sender and the receiver. This keeps changing as the conversation keeps going. So in this situation, let's say our speaker on the left is thinking about this, and she believes that's exactly what she said. However, our listener understood this. So what happened? What went wrong? Why does miscommunication happen? Does it happen because of the speaker or because of the listener? There are cultural differences. In some cultures, the emphasis is on the speaker to speak clearly, with clarity and in much detail, providing the correct message, the correct information. In some cultures, it's more the listener. It's the listener's fault if the message is not understood. But quite frankly, I'd like to advocate for this. Whose responsibility is it? I believe it's both people's responsibility. The sender or the receiver, really? I think it's both. And if you take that responsibility and if you want to improve your speaking and listening agility, that will automatically improve communication. As for the word agility, when you hear agility, maybe you're thinking of this or that. or maybe even an animal like a squirrel, being very agile. Yes, that's what it is per definition, because agility is the ability to move and think quickly and the acuity to make changes as needed. If we apply this definition to listening agility, we'll get the following definition. Listening agility is the ability to understand different accents and dialects, different pronunciation and intonation, creative vocabulary and sentence structure. Creative vocabulary is something that a non-native speaker would make up or use as a description because they don't know a specific word. So let's say you want to say wrench, but you don't know the word for a wrench. You know exactly what it is and what it does. So you could say a screw turning tool. Well, that's not a real word, but it's creative vocabulary. And if you are a non-native speaker watching, a wrench is this. But if you don't know the word, you might use creative vocabulary. So if you're a native speaker of English, true listening agility is to kind of understand what is meant by a creative vocabulary word like that. Also, when cultural reference is used, and it's your ability to adjust quickly, as we said before, very quickly as needed. But how do you improve your listening agility? Is this something you can actually do? Yes, you can. You can train your ears. You can expose yourself to different types of pronunciation. Keep listening to the way others pronounce words and see a pattern. Do it over and over again and make an effort to understand without judging. Don't say my English is better than theirs, or this is not how you pronounce it. You know, do we say tomato or tomato? What's right, what's wrong? Don't judge. Just try to understand different ways of pronunciation. Also appreciate the variety instead of forcing uniformity. We don't have to sound the same in order to communicate successfully with each other. Absolutely not necessary. It's actually very pretty that we all sound different, isn't it? Once you start appreciating the variety, maybe your ears will find it easier to understand. Also, value comprehensibility higher than accuracy. And I can tell you it's really hard. I'm an English language teacher, so I do appreciate accuracy, but I do value comprehensibility much more. And I can tell you typical English language tests like the TOEFL or IELTS or other tests you may want to take, they do the same. If what you say is very comprehensible, if they understand what you say, then the accent or the pronunciation doesn't matter that much anymore. Maybe you should consider that as a native speaker of English when communicating with non-native speakers of English. Also, please notice that what we understand as polite and normal is different across cultures. The way how somebody says something in English, if that sounds harsh or impolite, rude, or kind of weird to you, it's probably just a bad translation of something that sounds very polite and very normal in their native language. So rather than assuming that they know exactly what they said is rude or unconventional, well, explore. Ask them why they said that. Explain to them why you feel it's unusual, why you were taken aback a little. Um, Extend that courtesy to the non-native speaker, and you will learn amazing things about other cultures. And you will learn that it was actually polite and very normal. It was just not a good translation, and you can help that person say it better the next way around. All of this is considered listening agility. But we need both. We need both listening and speaking agility. We need to bring it together. If you combine your listening agility with speaking agility, what you will get is better communication, less misunderstanding, better collaboration, and better results. Isn't that worth the little effort? In order to complete this equation, we also need to learn what speaking agility is. So let's move on to speaking agility. Speaking agility is the ability to speak your native language in a way that makes it more comprehensible and less confusing to non-native speakers. How can you do that? Well, let's explore some things you can do. Like I said, a small step for you as a native speaker of English, a giant leap for your communication with non-native speakers. All you have to do is slow down and speak the language more like in bite-sized chunks. Ask open questions, visualize and demonstrate. Notice how your own culture influences your language. And avoid certain things like phrasal verbs, acronyms and filler words, tag questions and complex structures, idioms, and cultural reference. If you're wondering what all of that is, I'm going to give you an example for each of those. Let's start with phrasal verbs. In the sentence, he didn't let on about his plans. Let on is a phrasal verb. To a native speaker, that's very clear. And a native speaker would also use a contraction when speaking. Didn't. Now, these are two difficult things for non-native speakers. Didn't, the contraction may not be understood very well, and led on, the phrasal verb. Phrasal verbs are one of the most confusing thing to the native speaker. The native speaker may know the word let, but they most likely will not know led on. So instead, what could she say? You could say, he did not tell anyone about his plans. Seems so easy, right? But you have to think about it. You have to be willing to do it, and you have to be willing to recognize it. Yes, you may say, oh, he didn't let on about his plans, and then all of a sudden, the moment it's come out of your mouth, you go like, what I mean by that is he did not tell anyone about his plans. All of a sudden you have almost magically improved the communication between you and the non-native speaker. It just took you a little effort to see that let on is a phrasal verb and may not be easy to understand. So careful with phrasal verbs. By the way, a phrasal verb is a combination of a verb and a preposition like let and on. We have tons of them, hundreds of thousands of them, I guess, in our language. So be mindful when you realize that you've just used one, explain it. What does it mean? Or if you can, avoid them altogether. Another thing to avoid is acronyms and filler words. Now, I realize this is a very extreme example. You might say, come on, who says that? Who talks or writes like that? Well, I wanted to pack as many of those acronyms in here: FYI, TMI, ASAP or ASAP, TBA, BTW, MIA, LMK, THX. As a native speaker of English, I'm sure you know exactly what they mean. And we have a filler word like kinda, kind of, and kind of wants the draft ASAP. If you say things like that, the message will most certainly be misunderstood. All right, you want to make sure we understand all the acronyms here? Like, fine, let's do a little quiz. I'm going to say the acronym, FYI. I'll wait a few seconds, and we'll check if you know what it is. Because I'm pretty sure we have a couple of non-native speakers watching this video, so let's see if you understand. FYI, for your information. TMI, too much information. ASAP or ASAP, as soon as possible. TBA, to be announced. BTW, by the way. MIA, missing in action. Yes, kind of a military term, I guess. It's made its way into common language, so if somebody is nowhere to be found, they're MIA. LMK, let me know, and THX, meaning thanks. So thank you for not doing that when you communicate with non-native speakers. Just avoid them. They're very confusing for non-native speakers. Another thing to avoid are tag questions. Okay, what is a tag question? This is a tag question. This wouldn't be a bad idea, would it? The would-it is the tag, and that makes it a tag question. Now, why is this confusing? Wouldn't be a bad idea. It means it's a good idea, right? So why did you say bad idea and negate it? This is very confusing for non-native speakers. And the tag at the end, they usually don't get the tag at all. So what can you say? How can you make this easier? Easier to understand? We don't have to be confusing. We could just say, do you also think that this is a good idea? And then your question would be very clear. Your question would not be misunderstood. It's back to the same old question how we started. Whose fault is it when a message is not understood? Is it the speaker's fault or is it the listener's fault? The sender or the receiver? Well, I hope you're getting your answer by watching this video. And I hope you see what you can do in order to almost instantly improve communication with a non-native speaker of English. Another thing to avoid was complex structures. For example, this. I was wondering, given the sensitive nature of this matter, whether we'd better consider alternative options. Wow, it's a mouthful. Do you think that's easy to understand for a non-native speaker? No, it's very confusing. Yes, you wanted to show off your excellent language skills. Yes, you're very eloquent, you're a very good speaker of English, but isn't it more important to communicate? Isn't it more important that your message is understood? How could you say this to be understood more easily? Well, instead you could say, this is a difficult situation. Maybe other options are better. What do you think? Now, if you say that, I guarantee the message is understood. Whenever possible, we should also avoid idioms or idiomatic expressions. What's an example for an idiom? Like this. It's a no-brainer. That's an idiom. There are hundreds of thousands of them. If you Google idioms in English, you get a ton of them, and they're used on a daily basis. It's very normal for native speakers of English and, let's say, advanced non-native speakers of English who've learned some of them. But more often than not, one of them, once in a while, is completely misunderstood. So if your non-native speaker of English does not know that idiom, it's a no-brainer. What might they think? No brain? So it's a stupid idea, right? That's not what it means. So what could you say instead so that it's a no-brainer is perfectly understood? Well, you could say, this makes the decision easy. Let's do it. Right? And like I said, we say these things without thinking. So you could say, oh, it's a no-brainer. Then you realize what you just said, and you can still say, what I mean by that is, this makes the decision easy. Let's do it. You can always say what I mean by that, and that really helps with communication. Another thing to avoid, or at least to consider what you just said, is when you use cultural reference. Cultural reference means something that everybody in your cultural circle knows exactly what it means, but for somebody outside that cultural circle, it makes no sense whatsoever. So if I said to you, oh, wow, this is like betting on the Cleveland Browns, what do you think it means? Well, If you have never heard of the Cleveland Browns, if you know absolutely nothing about American football, and if you just heard that, what might that person think? What might you think? Maybe you think, who? Betting what? Or on what? Or who? Is this something good or is this something bad? Well, instead, you could say, this is a bad idea. We're most likely going to fail. If you want to use an expression like that and you realize what you just said, just give the explanation. This may actually start a very interesting cultural discussion and you can explain things. This is a very good thing to do once you realize you've just used a cultural reference or one of the other things I just mentioned you should avoid. Culture actually has a bigger influence on language than you might think. In the US, if you say, oh, you might want to read the handbook for your first project meeting, we perfectly understand what that means, right? You might want to. Well, but somebody from outside that cultural reference frame might think, oh, reading the handbook is optional. Might want to. That probably means might, may, could, should. Well, I can do it, but I don't have to do it. It's optional, which is very incorrect because if you're a native speaker of English, you know exactly that this means please read the handbook before your first project meeting. It is very important. And maybe this is exactly what you should say in order to avoid miscommunication. Other ways how culture influences language are things like, do you have any questions? What's your opinion? You might feel this is very normal thing to ask because in your culture, it is normal that people ask questions when they have questions. It is normal to voice their opinion when they have an individual opinion. However, if you come from a different culture where this is not very common, you might think this. I'm not going to ask. I don't want to look stupid. Why would my opinion matter? Like my individual opinion? Really? Is this a trick question? I gotta be careful. Well, to avoid that, you may pursue a lot of different strategies. You could suggest summarizing, you could encourage anonymous input, and you could use one-on-one feedback. But sometimes asking if anybody has questions or what their individual opinion is, and you get no answer, it's not because their level of English is bad or they didn't understand you. It might just be a cultural difference. Now, since language and culture are so inseparable, there are other things that you may want to bear in mind. So, a few things that could influence how you're being understood by non-native speakers of English is direct versus indirect communication, saving face, turn taking when you speak, and how much silence is okay or even required to respond, power distance, basically the role of the boss, or individualism versus collectivism, or the role of the employee, and many other factors that influence communication that have a cultural background. By the way, if that sort of topic interests you, go back to the overview of my channel and you'll find one video called Introduction to Intercultural Communication, where I discuss many of these topics that may play a role when communicating across cultures. Well, hopefully this video has inspired you to improve your listening and speaking agility, because I hope I made you see that it can instantly improve communication between you, the native speaker, and the non-native speaker of English. Try it. You'll love it, and you'll love the instant results. As always, if you have questions about these topics, if you want to hire me as a speaker, teacher, trainer, coach, find me online. You can easily find me by using my name, Renate Urban, my business name, Urban Training and Services. You can find me on my website, or you can connect with me via LinkedIn. So thank you very much for watching. And I really hope I could give you some good ideas how to instantly improve communication between native and non-native speakers of English. It takes two to tango. Don't forget, there's always something you can do as well. If you like these type of topics around intercultural communication and language learning, subscribe to my channel. Come back for more videos that are uploaded on a regular basis. Thank you for watching and have a great day. Goodbye.